Sounds good.
Hi, homeroom. I'm here with Emily Green. She was Emily Diemer back in the day. She graduated in 2012, and she's got an interesting story because she was originally going to go to Purdue, and Purdue didn't work out for her, but she went an alternative route, and now she's a pharmacist. So she's doing really good. Emily, thanks for joining Homeroom today.
Hey, you're welcome.
Do you want to tell us about where you were 8 or 9 years ago in high school looking at Purdue, and then how that worked out?
Yeah, so I graduated in 2012. I had it set in my mind that I wanted to go to a big college out of state, which my parents were not a huge fan of. So they told me they weren't going to pay for a college out of state. So I worked my tail off and got actually offered a full scholarship to Purdue for choosing a science major and being a woman in science from out of state. So I got my wish, traveled out to Purdue University in West Lafayette, Indiana, spent my first year there, realized that I totally did not want to be a forensic scientist. The day they took us to the pig farm, which is exactly what it sounds like. So that just was not what I wanted to do. But my scholarship was linked to being a forensic scientist. So if I changed my major, I would lose that scholarship. So I kind of had to make the tough decision about whether I wanted to continue with a major that I knew I hated and wouldn't mount to a career, or if I was going to leave Purdue and move back home. So that's ultimately the route I chose. Was I left Purdue, I moved back home, I took a semester off. I worked 3 jobs during that time. I worked at a hotel and Kohl's and a restaurant, and literally worked some days 20 hours a day, would go home and sleep for 4 hours. And then saved up money, bought myself a car, and commuted to Montco, which when I was in high school, just being honest, was like the worst case scenario, was going to Montco. And then I realized once I was there that was totally the right choice and what I should have done all along. And went to Montco. Tuition was cheap. It gave me time to figure out what I wanted to do. So I just took some classes, decided I wanted to be a pharmacist. I don't even know where that idea came from. But I took the classes I needed to do, applied to pharmacy school, which is one doctorate degree that does not require a bachelor's. So I was able to roll straight into pharmacy school about a year, or I guess it was 2.5 years after graduating. I started would have been fall of 2015, so 3 years after graduating. And then spent my 4 years in pharmacy school. I went to Lipscomb University in Nashville, Tennessee, which was a fun experience being down in the South. I graduated with honors, moved my poor husband, who's from Florida. We met in pharmacy school, and I moved him back up to Pennsylvania. We got jobs as pharmacists, and now we have kind of the little American dream with the white picket fence house and 5 dogs and 5 cats. So we're those crazy animal people. But it all worked out, even though it was kind of a roundabout way to get there.
Wow, that's crazy. Let me back you up, because I was taking some notes.
Yeah.
So you're going to be a forensic scientist. Now, the pig farm, are we talking animal testing? Is that what they were doing with the pigs, and it was kind of an ethical issue for you?
No. So Purdue University is one of the only schools in the nation that has a forensic science degree. And they got certification because they opened up. Now, Purdue's in the middle of literally nowhere. It's like you can drive 2 hours in any direction and still be on a farm. So they took some farmland and put pigs, dead pigs, in various degrees of decomposition from various different things they did to these pigs. Like they shot them, they stabbed them, they blew them up, like whatever they thought would be useful for students to know how to decipher what happened. And they stuck them out in this farm. and then you would go to this farm with your little clipboard and your notes and look for specific types of bugs to figure out how long that pig's been dead. You would look for signs of decomposition and like skin and all sorts of just disgusting. It took one day there to realize that was so not my career path.
Yeah, that's gross. I
It really
don't
was.
blame you.
That smell never leaves you.
Yeah. And you talked a little bit like there's some kind of stigma going to community college, and I hear that sometimes, but I know too many people who have gone that route and have been very successful.
Yeah.
And before here, my first teaching job, I taught at night at a community college, and there's nothing. I mean, it's a smart move, if you're going to go to school and pay. Let's face it, college is probably one of the most expensive investments you're going to make in your whole life outside of buying a house. It's got to be the right fit, and to blow all kinds of cash in a 4-year college when you're not quite sure it's not the right fit, it'd be ridiculous.
Exactly. Yeah. And I was always a good student in high school. I was in like the Distinguished Scholars top 10% of my graduating class. And for whatever reason, I decided in my head that going to a community college would just be like embarrassing. Like, when everybody's walking around senior year, which might be different for you guys because you're all on Zoom, but when everybody was walking around senior year with their, hooded sweatshirts with the name of the college they're going to on it. And I thought that going to Montco would just be like the worst case scenario, just embarrassing as all heck. And I even thought that a little bit about going to like the state schools in Pennsylvania too, which in hindsight probably also would have been a good option. But so I was stubborn. I sent myself out to the middle of nowhere, Indiana, and I mean, it was a fun year by all means. It was a Big Ten college, but it just was not a right fit for me. And I mean, I didn't even visit the college before I decided. I just decided out of pure stubbornness, to be completely honest.
Right. Hey, let's fast forward to today. How about now you've been working as a pharmacist. What's a typical day look like as a pharmacist? Take me from when you roll in. What are you doing? That kind of thing. What are your hours?
Yeah, so I recently changed positions. I was working as a retail pharmacist for Walgreens, which is a different ballgame than my current position, which is I'm a pharmacist for Costco. There's just a different level of staffing that they provide you in different hours. But my husband's a pharmacist for Walgreens. His typical hours are 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. He works 40 hours a week between those hours. His shifts kind of alternate. He'll do morning shifts, evening shifts. Sometimes he works 12-hour shifts. Whereas my schedule is a little bit more set. Our location's only open 10 to 7. So I'm usually there between those hours. I don't have any late nights. We're closed on Sundays. But basically my job is I walk into work and I have to fill out the prescriptions that came in overnight. A lot of it's easier, like after the first fill of a medication, it's pretty streamlined from there. My main job is making sure that first fill, that the patient's getting a medication that's safe for them based off of the rest of their medication profile that they filled with us. And also, unfortunately, a big chunk of my job is kind of being the police of controlled substances, because everybody knows there's an opioid epidemic and seemingly coming up a benzodiazepine or like sleeping aid medication epidemic right behind it. So my job is to make sure that patients aren't having too much of that, which would be against federal law. There's limits for how much patients can have on hand of those medications, and also that they're using them appropriately and safely. So if they're asking for a refill 2 weeks after they just got a 30-day supply, that's a problem, and we need to figure out why that is. So that's unfortunately a big portion of my job as well. But it's just a different different ball game. And there's also different types of pharmacists, so you don't have to work retail. That was something I wanted to do. I wanted to work out in the community and have interaction with patients on a day-to-day basis. But I have colleagues and friends I went to school with that work in hospitals, and they spend most of their time dealing with doctors and nurses instead of patients, which can come with its own set of variables. And then there's also pharmacists that work in industry and work on the development of drugs, or who work for insurance companies. So there's a big realm of pharmacy that I did not know existed prior to going to pharmacy school.
Yeah, it's funny sitting here. I wouldn't even think that, but you are a line of defense against someone going to different pharmacies and trying to just load up on opioids or whatnot. So that's really interesting. Hey, Emily, thanks for being here. Do you have a last minute piece of advice for a bunch of 12th graders sitting there where you were 8 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, I would just tell y'all to stay open-minded. Know that, sorry, Mr. Collins and I were talking about this before you guys joined the call, that know that it's not going to be an easy, streamlined process between where you are now, where you think you want to be, and where you end up. The majority of my friends that I went to pharmacy school had no idea they wanted to be pharmacists until they went and did, a 4-year degree in something silly and then changed their minds. So I would just highly recommend, giving yourself a break, and knowing that you probably don't know the answers right now, and that that's okay. And eventually you'll get there, whether that's, before you graduate or after. I have plenty of friends that went that route too, that graduated with 4-year degrees and then realized that degree was not useful for what they wanted to do, and turned around and chose a second degree and came to pharmacy school. So it's not always a streamlined process. I'm kind of one of the lucky ones that, doesn't sound like it, but I mean, I became a doctor within 7 years from graduating. So it's not always going to be a streamlined, easy process. So give yourself a break and know that, I mean, there's time and you can change your mind.
Hey, thanks a lot, Emily. Thanks for joining us. That's a great message.
Absolutely. Y'all have a great day.